Concerning making the world a better place, reducing suffering on a large scale, reducing injustice on a large scale, some logic is more important than others. Some principles and understanding, when made really clear, is much more powerful and helpful to humanity than, you know, 10,000 other arguments and ideas that might be put forth concerning the welfare of the people. So, the idea that freedom and safety need to be held in a kind of balance, that you have to give up some freedom in order to preserve more safety. This is one of the most important things to zero in on and analyze because it's actually a huge deception. And this huge deception has been utilized over and over and over again by people in positions of power to not only maintain their power, but to expand it and to be even more abusively controlling than they were in the past. There is a famous quote by Benjamin Franklin that goes like this. He said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." So that's an interesting quote, but the problem with it is it doesn't get to the key understanding and reasoning that would be truly empowering. As it stands, it's pro-freedom, it's a pro-liberty statement, but without the crucial details, it doesn't really have the power to affect positive change as much as it could if it had those details. So in this talk, I'm going to put forward those details so that this repeated deception and pattern of abuse can hopefully one day come to an end and the world really can become a better place. This is basically a continuation and clarification of two previous talks I gave. One was titled Why Freedom Matters, and another was titled How Society Keeps Getting Played Over and Over and Over Again. So, in order to understand how this deception operates, you have to analyze these terms, first of all, and to see how they may overlap with one another, what equivalencies may exist, and what false equivalencies may be put forward. So let's start with the context of the past few years where the conversation about reducing freedom in the interest of safety was very prevalent, right? Because they were saying that we need to accept medical mandates, which is a restriction of your freedom, in order to preserve the safety of the people, right? So this again is that same idea, just manifest in a new form, but you'll see it in all sorts of other areas of, political operation where they say we need to enact more control in this sphere of life because it's going to, increase your safety. We need to, you know, uh, gain more powers of surveillance, for example, and be able to invade your privacy, but it's for your safety, or we need to increase taxation, but we're going to do good things with that tax money that is necessary for your safety, right? Or uh, a very clear example could be like conscription, right? Saying, well, yes, we need to draft people into the military, but it's for the safety of the nation, right? So you lose all autonomy, all freedom to make your own choice, right? You're forced into serving the military, right? And again, the justification is safety, right? Just over and over and over again, it's this same dynamic at play. It's exchanging freedom for safety, right? That's the play over and over again. Gun control, that's of course the whole basis of gun control, right? We need to further disarm the nonviolent population, but it's for your safety, right? It's to protect children, right? Yes, you're losing your personal freedom, but it's going to, increase the safety of children out there, so it's worth uh, it's worth you losing your freedom, right? This is the deception. And if you don't see exactly how it's a deception, that's understandable because it's never been explained to us. And so, again, in this talk, I'm going to do my best to explain exactly, without any opinion, just using pure logic and facts, explain how this deception is operating. So, returning to this context of medical mandates, or what one might call medical tyranny, what is the main motivation, right? The main, advertised motivation. It's to reduce suffering, right? That's what all the politicians and all the experts and everybody is agreeing. That's what we want to accomplish here, right? Okay, there's a sickness, people are suffering from the sickness, that's bad. We want to reduce the suffering, right? So it's a response to suffering, right? Sickness is a form of suffering. So just, focus in just on that for a moment, because it's easy to speed past these fundamentals, but it's really the key to understanding what's really going on. So again, sickness is a form of suffering, and the goal is to reduce suffering. Okay? So if what we're trying to do ultimately on a fundamental level is reduce suffering, would it make sense that the solution would be another form of suffering? Right? If the goal ultimately, if we, strip down the superficial level and just get to the brass tacks of it, get down to what we're fundamentally trying to accomplish, which is a reduction of suffering, would it make sense to employ a different form of suffering as a solution to the problem of suffering, right? That wouldn't make sense, right? You're just throwing more of the same problem onto the problem as a solution, right? I think if you just ask people using that terminology, they would agree. They would say, well, yeah, if you're trying to reduce someone's suffering, you shouldn't offer them a solution that makes them suffer more, right? That's not helping, right? Because there should be an overall decrease in suffering if you're actually helping them, right? If the goal is to reduce suffering. Okay. So then when we talk about something like medical mandates, you need to look at what that is, again, fundamentally. You need to distill that down to what the essence of the action actually is. So the essence of it is some people who claim to be authorities or experts are saying you no longer have the right to make medical decisions for yourself. You no longer have the right to control your own body, what goes in it or what goes on it, and we can make those decisions for you. Okay? And so that's actually a claim of ownership of your body, because one of the aspects of ownership is that you have right to control what you own, right? Like you own your lawnmower, so you have the right to control your lawnmower. Not anybody can just take your lawnmower and use it however they want and do whatever they want to it, paint it whatever color they want, modify it, whatever, because they're not the owner of it, right? You get to control it because you own it, right? The most fundamental form of private property is your own body. So if some people are telling you you no longer have the right to control your own body, they're actually claiming ownership of your body. And what is it when you've lost all bodily autonomy? well, you're a slave. That's just technically what it is, right? Slavery is completely eliminating the autonomy of an individual and forcing them to do what you want them to do. Their body basically becomes your property, right? Just as a farmer on a livestock farm treats an animal as their property, they can do whatever they want to the animal, right? They can inject the animal with whatever they want. They can, murder the animal whenever they want, forcibly impregnate the animal whenever they want, so on and so forth. Confine the animal however they want. If it's a young male calf, a male cow, right? And they want to produce veal, right? So they have the right to then take this young animal and put it in this tiny space so that the muscles can't develop, so the muscles become more tender, and then they can sell it as veal on the market, right? They have the right to confine that young animal to a small space where they obviously suffer, but it's considered legit because they have a claim of ownership over that animal, right? So if someone else has control over your body, what goes in it, what goes on it, what you can do with it, whether you can travel or not, right? Obviously travel restrictions, whether you can go to work, whether you can go in this building or not go in this building, so on and so forth. That's a claim of ownership over your body. That is slavery. That is a form of slavery. It's on the spectrum of slavery. Slavery is actually a form of suffering. It's a mode of suffering. You can't actually be happy and enslaved at the same time. So, if slavery is a form of suffering and sickness is a form of suffering, slavery can't be a solution to sickness because you're just trying to remedy one form of suffering with another form of suffering. And you might be thinking now, well, wait a minute. These are different kinds of suffering, though. And what if these restrictions did actually reduce the sickness, right? What if, yes, we increased the slavery, but what if the sickness went down? Wouldn't that then justify the slavery? Wouldn't that justify the communism, which is the abolition of private property, including private property ownership of your own body? It's a good question. It's one to think about. It's one you probably never thought about before because it's never been proposed to us to even consider, right? This is not something they're going to talk about in state schools. It's not something they're going to talk about on the nightly news. They're not going to talk about the equivalency of slavery with suffering and sickness with suffering, and does it make sense to try and remedy sickness with a form of slavery? So, even if the slavery eliminated the sickness, even if somehow it 100% eliminated whatever sickness was occurring, would that be a legitimate solution? Would you call that a victory? Would you call that a success? Well, no, if the ultimate goal was to reduce suffering, right? You have to look at the fundamental goal, right? Not lose sight of the big picture, right? You can't disregard the suffering caused by slavery and just focus on the suffering caused by sickness, right? Because that's how you get hoodwinked. So another key understanding here is what safety actually is, right? So this Benjamin Franklin quote about he who would trade liberty for safety, right? Or in other words, who would trade freedom for safety? Even the way that statement is put together isn't actually really logical, because this idea of trading safety and liberty as if they're two separate things is actually mistaken, because safety is actually another form of liberty, or you could say freedom is another form of safety. So this is something you may not have, considered before, but if you really think about it and analyze it, it can become clear to you. And you can look at, what's helpful is to look at definitions of words, right? So what's the definition of safety? Safety is protection from injury, right? Protection from suffering, right? Ultimately, why do we want to avoid injuries of various kinds? Because it causes suffering, right? So again, the ultimate goal with safety is to reduce suffering, right? So safety is defined as the protection from suffering, right? So does it make sense to introduce a form of suffering as a form of safety? No, because safety, again, the definition is fundamentally protection from suffering. So if someone's saying to you, well, for safety, we need to enslave you more, that's really a contradiction in terms. They're saying, well, in order to reduce your suffering in this way, we need to increase your suffering in this other way, right? Again, the two main forms of suffering we could say are sickness and slavery. I've even heard it said those are the main two tools of the devil that he uses to try and counter God's plan to make life on earth more heavenly and instead make it more hellish. He is interested in increasing sickness and increasing slavery because those are the two modes of suffering, right? Rather than having satisfaction, having happiness. Patrick Henry, who was instrumental in the American Revolution but has since been downplayed by state education, is most famous for his speech wherein he said, "Give me liberty or give me death." A very similar statement was given by General John Stark, also hero of the American Revolutionary War, and he's known for his statement, "Live free or die." These statements need to be clarified a bit for the true wisdom within them to be apparent. So, give me liberty or give me death. This is actually in the context of a discussion on tyranny or on slavery. So, when Patrick Henry says, "Give me liberty or give me death," he's saying, give me either of those rather than slavery, rather than tyranny. Right? So live free or die rather than be a slave. Emiliano Zapata had a also similar statement coming from the same wisdom, the same truth, when he said, "It's better to die on your feet than to live on your knees." Actually, the end of the quote of "Live free or die" by John Stark is the second half of that statement is that death isn't the worst, right? That it's not the worst outcome. So if you have a choice between freedom, death, or slavery, they're saying, I'll take freedom or death. I'll take either one of those two over that third option. Right? This probably hasn't been clarified for you. I've never heard it clarified before, and when I understood it, I realized, well, this is important, and no wonder this reasoning hasn't been clarified, right? So liberty or death, and you can think or slavery. So you have a choice of A, B, or C. And they're saying A or B, liberty or death, is better than option C, is better than being a slave. And how could that be? Well, if being a slave is just being in a constant state of suffering, wouldn't it make sense then that death could actually be better than that? I mean, people who have pets euthanize, kill, put to sleep, quote unquote, their pets on a regular basis when they find that the animal is suffering too much, right? And they say, well, death would be better than for the animal to just continue to suffer, right? It's a mercy killing, right? Or if you find an animal that's been hit on the roadside by a vehicle, and the damage is just so immense to the animal's body that it seems that there's no chance whatsoever that you could possibly heal them. Oftentimes what will happen is someone will kill the animal to end their suffering, because they say, well, between this severe suffering that's not going to stop or death, it's better for them to have death, right? So to loop back to the original key logic here, whenever you have people proposing some form of abuse, right, some form of enslavement as a remedy to some danger in the world, you have to recognize that's a deception, because they're just offering you one form of suffering as a solution to another. I'll leave it there. I hope you found this talk insightful. I hope other people will talk about this reasoning and expose the pattern of manipulation and abuse and communism in the political context that just keeps coming around over and over and over again, saying that they need to increase their abuse of control, decrease your freedom in the name of safety. And with this understanding, you can penetrate through that propaganda and see it for what it really is, which is just evil deception set on actually increasing suffering and decreasing freedom and happiness for humanity. All right, thanks for listening.